When you hear the phrase soft as steel, what do you think of? While the word steel might conjure up images such as massive high-rise buildings, where does the soft part come in? And what exactly does this mean in our work and in our lives? Welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Doran, featuring engaging conversations with a wide range of industry leaders around soft skills, how we practice love, inclusion, social justice, and compassionate leadership that's everlasting in the workplace. And now, here's Dennis Doran.
My guest today is Nitin Govila, the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Search Ferrari Group, headquartered in France. Nitin is an expert in architecture and design, the construction industry, composite materials, manufacturing materials, and building facade. He is a people-centric leader who is always very alert and aware of the impact of company decisions on people. He has also always believed that as a professional, one needs to find ways to give back to society. Nitin has mentored and guided leaders, country managers, territory managers, product management team members, and plant managers. When Nitin reached out to me about being a guest on the Soft as Steel podcast, I did some quick research. For instance, I learned that Nitin is a meditation trainer for a global nonprofit, Heartfulness. This says much about how he views wellness in all our lives. I also found a post that Nitin had authored on LinkedIn that will be important to our conversation today. The intersection of heart and mind and leadership can be a catalyst for positive change, as it encompasses compassion, empathy, and mindfulness. Leaders who cultivate these attributes curate nurturing environments that not only invigorate their teams, but also propel innovation. After all, creativity and fresh ideas only abound in environments where your people feel like it's safe to take risks. The profound impact that heart-led leadership can have the trajectory of businesses, communities, and our cultural fabric as a whole should never be overlooked. The key challenge is always about being able to listen to your heart and how to develop the skill to do so. There are several clues in what my guest values in this quote. Literally moments ago, a colleague of mine talked about putting people first. This is the essence of heart-led leadership. It recognizes that people are the most important resource in business and society, and they must be sustained just like any other resource, but first and foremost. Nitin, welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for having me over, and it's a pleasure that you accepted our request to, have me here on your podcast, and looking forward. And thanks a lot for this very kind introduction.
Well, it was close to being a memorial service, but I drew the line. One of the things I think I may have mentioned when we had our first attempt that was sabotaged by technology, this is a spontaneous conversation. However, I do have to say that there is an interesting dichotomy as I look at you and consider your background, your experiences, and all those things. You very much are a highly successful business person, but you also are appearing to be a highly successful human, and that you bring together the ingredients of the simple part. Again, I'm the soft skills guy, as you know, from my book cover, et cetera. So I talk about so many of these things that were in this quote of yours. That's why when I read that, I said, that's what we got to talk about, because the business part, I say, is the easy part. And what makes it difficult is how we choose to embrace the importance of valuing people and relationships, in my view. This is my view.
No, absolutely, Dennis. I agree with you. And in fact, as you said, success again is sometimes a misleading word, because, who's defining that? Is the individual defining that I'm successful or not, or the person opposite you is defining, because the society may see one person successful in a certain way, either because of the title or the position or whatever. But in the end, I suppose the second point, that success as a human, I suppose, or to be known as a good human being, when you retire or when you move from your business life to any other life, I think that can only be defined by each one of us ourselves, right? We don't need a validation, I suppose. And that's where the role of the heart comes very key, because the heart will never lie. The question is, do we have the courage and the vision to listen to that heart, to listen, to feel those messages which are coming, to be able to, even interpret them or understand them, and possibly act on them, because that requires courage, because it's an unfiltered message. It's not colored by the right or the wrongs or the good or the bad or any external nuances. It is what it is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
on the material world, we may sometimes feel, oh, if I do this, if I say this, okay, this may be good or this may be bad. But the key thing is, that's where courage is required. The sensitization of our inner self is required to be able to feel that and hear that, and then finally act on it. So for me, absolutely, I think a good human, to be remembered as a good human being who was also maybe had a reasonable success in a certain profession, I think is that's much more important, rather than defining a successful business person, because again, there are many definitions there.
Yeah, yeah. You're a relatively young man in comparison to myself, obviously, but you have a tremendous amount of responsibility in a global business. So you travel always. You are in different parts of the world. You are therefore in different cultures around the world. How do we take the obvious the clue that you've given us in terms of who you really are as a person, and when we talk about heart-led leadership, how do you implement that? How do you practice that as you moved it from culture to culture to culture?
Well, that's a good question, actually. Very good question, because, I mean, generally, as professionals, we would obviously, the first thing is try to talk to people, who would have been to a certain country or worked with a certain country. And then we form our own constructs and opinions and possibly start interacting with that or what we would have read. But I think the real part comes is when you actually interact. And the I would say two elements are key in that, to be a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would say a very key element is curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Not really saying that, okay, maybe I'm the boss, maybe I'm someone else coming from head office or someone else coming from a certain regional office for that matter. But
Mm-hmm.
whether I go first time, whether I go the 10th time or the 100th time, it's all about observation. It's all about curiosity. Just look around, and then also listening to people. And really, my
Mm-hmm.
understanding of culture not only comes from in that office, like, okay, I go from the airport to the office or to the hotel, and then either to the office to meet the team or the local customers, but I also try to take out some time to just be in that place. Maybe take out time in the mornings or in the evenings, just walk around, interact outside of business, because that's where you also enhance your knowledge of culture. That what are the things people do, how do they behave, what's important to them, interact. And then when you bring that understanding through the element of curiosity, because you will end up then asking more questions than saying do this or do that, then at least then it really automatically builds the connect, and then you're able to find the way, the right way to work together.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, I would say lot of similarities exist between culture, but a lot of differences also exist. But the human to human connection, I think nothing can beat that. Even you might, even if you don't even understand 10% of the language or whatever.
In your comments, you mentioned two specific ideas, or more importantly, soft skills. You mentioned good listening, to be a good listener. Listening in the world as I see it, listening is a skill. It's a skill that can be taught. To add the adjective good or great or excellent to that, translated it from simply being a skill to being a quality of a person, to being a soft skill, something which enhances their ability to get to know people and for people to get to know them. And then you also mentioned curiosity, which is, again, an incredibly valuable soft skill or quality for people to possess. Some people don't understand themselves to know that they are curious, or that they lack curiosity, or that they're not good listeners. So as you mentor a whole range of different kinds of individuals in the organization you're involved with, I'm sure that these are part of the among the things we talk to them about is what those mean to our ability, not simply to connection in the business world is simply a plug. Connection in the personal world is much deeper than that. But once we make that connection and go about it in a sincere way with genuine interest, then the ability for us to communicate, which is more complicated in a multicultural environment, a multilingual environment, and that you face all the time. I think that the challenge of that has to be incredible. And so some might say, well, Dennis, don't talk about that. So he's all over the world, but you're not. You just live in the United States. Yeah, so everybody's the same here, which is certainly not true. There are many different cultures here. There are multiple languages here. The same kind of issues can confront us, but sadly, in the construction industry, and at least in the U.S., we're not giving enough credence to the absolute difference-making importance of understanding your qualities as a person and learning how to understand other people's qualities for the benefit of a relationship. Your comments?
See, I have not been too much exposed, I would say, to what happens in U.S. in the construction industry, but one thing you're absolutely right that, US is a melting pot anyway. As they say, it's a much used word. There are different cultures. Okay, some have come as first, just moved in few years back or moving in. Others have been there. They are the second generation. But let's also not forget that, part of the culture is passed on within the family or in the genes. So whether somebody is an Asian or an American or a Latin American or European or coming from Africa, each of them will carry those elements anyway, right? So finally, they are Americans, okay, that's true. But those elements also play a very key part from the background I am brought in. From the home where I am or my family environment. So I think that's very key. I suppose construction environment, I would say, across the world, within a country, could be a little bit very uniform in the way of working. Maybe it's the environment in construction is that suddenly people assume that everybody is rough. I suppose, I don't know whether I'm making sense or not, that when you're in dust, you're in cement, or you're outside, totally in nature, you kind of, I don't know, there's an assumption maybe whoever is working in that industry has to be rough or is rough, so there's that assumption which plays on both sides, and possibly that maybe kind of affects the interaction, because if you're already assuming somebody who's maybe building a bridge or a highway or a building, how can I be maybe polite, or how can I speak like that? I just need to speak in one way. That's the only way people will understand. I would disagree there, because again, it's individuals. I suppose a word spoken softly, everybody appreciates that. For sure. If things are not moving well or deliberately things are being done wrongly, we always have to play a role, right? Sometimes business is also role playing, that you have to ensure that the message goes strongly. But in other times, I don't think so. That assumption of, because you're working in a rough environment, that people are rough as individuals, I think that's a wrong assumption which is being carried, and that affects the interactions.
Yeah. Your points are well taken. I have for years been talking in our industry again about the notion of how we treat one another as people. And this is a term I think has global application and meaning. We've talked for a number of years about the notion of embracing diversity. Diversity simply meaning that every person is different. Every person is unique. There are not two people that are alike, and even identical twins are different. And that diversity is something which needs to be embraced rather than resisted. And resistance has diminished a bit. And I can only speak about the United States, but I'm sure some of this applies in other places to at least to some degree. But here, I'm interested in your thoughts and reaction. But here, we are still struggling with the notion of looking at one another and not seeing a black person, a brown person, an old person, a young person, a person that speaks Spanish, a person that speaks whatever. We are just seeing people. And so the term that has come more into vogue is the term inclusion. And so we need to look at our environment so we can stay in the construction industry. Now you work in that industry as do I. So it's a place that we understand. And one of the things that's so challenging is that the resistance is largely fear-based. Again, we're afraid that if we behave in a certain way, there's going to be a consequence. And this is a thought that is not a unique thought, but I'm having it as a result of just our interaction. That's why I call this a spontaneous conversation. And I think that there are four elements or topics of conversation that I don't know if you've had a chance as you've been traveling around to listen to any of my podcasts. But last year I did a 4-hour virtual summit. And I had individuals that talked on 4 different topics. One topic was love. Now, a person that talks about mindfulness and the value of the practice of meditation understands what love is all about, I would safely assume. We also talked about inclusion, and then we talked about social justice. And you had recently, I guess it was an article posting where you were talking about mental health. Which is a crisis in our industry. And again, I don't know what the numbers are outside the United States, but they are more than alarming. So we have mental health issues, we have addiction, and we're dealing with suicide. And so here's Dennis going around talking about, what's love have to do with it? What's the role of love in the construction industry? What do you think?
Oh, I think love is a very strong word, but sometimes also very misunderstood. I suppose part of the problem comes is a fear that showing that kind of element, because everybody has it, everybody has that quality. The question is, are you able to show it? Are you able to demonstrate it? Do you sometimes feel comfortable to demonstrate it? Because as you just mentioned, this fear of the fear you talked about, part of that also comes is that sometimes we equate that if we show this kind of element of our personality, the softness, the ability to even bend or show this empathy, compassion or love to people, it will be treated as weakness, and we project it on others. For example, maybe as a boss, we project it, if I show this element of my side, maybe others will take advantage of that, So I think it works both ways, but I always feel that to wait for somebody to show that is a wrong approach, that, okay, if the other person shows, then only I'll do. I think it should start from one side. If I feel I should do it, let's not worry about whether it will be reciprocated or not. Maybe it will not be, more often not be than be, because in business environment, obviously everybody also works with their own interests and certain elements. So there are much more elements at play. So even if you show your soft side, it does not mean that you're weak, because in the end, again, it boils down that if you're in your heart, you feel comfortable, I suppose it also makes you stronger. The inner courage is much more bigger and higher than any kind of physical or the other kind of courage. So showing that and being truthful to your inner self, where if you look inside, you feel comfortable that what I did was right. I think you'll have a good sleep. You wouldn't worry about how anybody's reacting. I mean, it's their way to look at it. So I suppose that should be the first step to demonstrate, whether we call it love or empathy, compassion, but that should be the first step. It starts from me. I should not hesitate to show it. And I think more often than not, it will be reciprocated. If it's not, fine, we forget about it, we move ahead, but that should not make us change our personality, because then we are presenting a facade of ourselves, which is not really the true self. And it also creates all those things you talked about, because this is the duality which sometimes we have to present in today's world, is also part of the reason for this mental trauma, right?
Yes.
I know I'm not like this, but I have to behave like this in front of Dennis, right? So
Yes.
this is where, when I go back, I'm not able to face myself in the mirror. And this, the churning which goes in my head, is the reason also for this mental trauma and other challenges which we face. I mean, look at the today the generation, right? There's so much of social media. So if you're there, you're not there. That person has X followers. I don't have it. I'm so active. I'm not active, right? But maybe you're not a person like that. But the external environment is trying to make you do like that. So those kinds of things then create the pressure on your mental element, which creates this mental health issues. So I suppose if we are true and be one person as it is, I suppose we will, part of the mental health issue will automatically go away.
Yes. Yes. I agree. I agree fully with that. My mentor is a fellow by the name of Steve Farber. He's a recognized leadership authority. He's written several books. And in his first book, which he wrote over 20 years ago, but it still sells because it's got a great message. He says the following in this book. He says, "Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do." I can imagine you can attach to that instantaneously. What are your thoughts about those connections? Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Yeah, I think in the end, if there is love behind anything you do, people will benefit. I mean, I strongly believe in that, whether it's business or personal world, because when you do with that feeling, you will always bring more elements to a profession or to a professional, right? So even though you may not have a personal relationship with that person, which obviously can happen, you're not friends with everyone in your company, but at the same time, they will remember, they will carry some elements which they might have learned from you in the softer aspects, and this, it also shows that when we take career decisions, we also know where we are able to do that. Certain business environments may not be able to provide you that space to do so. So it also then makes you think whether I should be in this place or not, right? So in that sense, also, when you are at the right place and it comes naturally what you do, you're not thinking of 10, like a chess, you're not thinking 10 steps. Oh, if I say this, or if I do this, how will that person react? What will happen after that? Who will come into the picture? You just act to do what has to be done in that sense. You don't think about 10 meanings and 10 interpretations. Now, then, when you are able to do so, people are also able to see that passion that, okay, you are enjoying what you're doing. You're not doing, okay, we all obviously need money to live our lives, to, ensure our family does well. But at the same time, you're not, driven just only by that. There's a passion that you are enjoying what you're doing, and it comes out naturally.
Yeah. I'm sure we both know people in our lives that are quote unquote making a lot of money and are miserable. And so, money doesn't. That's an old phrase. Money doesn't buy happiness.
True.
Self-awareness is the free path to happiness. If we understand ourselves and align our values to the good, then chances are we're going to prosper. We're going to prosper emotionally, spiritually, and as well possibly financially. But if you put the money up first, then you'll just trip all over it. At least that's my view and my experience.
True.
I mean, you said there's so many wonderful things, words and phrases in your quote, and we're touching on it. You mentioned in the course of this conversation, you mentioned empathy as it relates to the heart and mind and leadership. I have nothing technical to talk to you about, with only one possible exception. And again, I'm saying that because I looked at your information and I had a series of questions would be good questions for conversation. We've come up with a whole other set of questions. I'd love to talk to you about some things that relate to materials, but frankly, I wouldn't enjoy that conversation as much as the one we're having now. But I did want to ask you to talk a bit about something that hasn't been talked about on a podcast to date. So it'll be a little bit of a bonus. It may end up finding its way out into being a clip that'll come out of this podcast. Talk to me about meditation and what it means to you, the role it plays in your daily life, the benefits associated with it, and kind of answer the question, why aren't more of us doing it? And I being one of those guilty parties. So share some thoughts about that.
Yeah. So meditation is now really, I would say, in the last many years or few years, has become the main buzzword. But I would say it's obviously also a very big word, but a very misunderstood word. Different people understand differently. For me, meditation simply is a way to be able to find a way to connect to your inner self and be in that space. And it is beyond thinking; it's more about feeling, and that's what has led me to follow this practice of heartfulness meditation. As the name goes, it's a heart-based system where we gently sit quietly, we connect to our inner self, which is our heart, and just rest there and be there. We are not. The whole idea of meditation is that we are not supposed to use the mind, because you're trying to white in a very crude way of understanding. People are looking at meditation is to say, okay, I don't want thoughts, right? There's too many thoughts in this world today that it bothers me. I just want that peace. You hear that word peace, mental peace, and relaxation. Now that's where sometimes meditation is misunderstood, and I always explain it in a very simple way that you do not concentrate to meditate, but you meditate to concentrate. Meaning that the moment if you're using your mind or focusing on something, that means you're really not meditating, you're concentrating. And the fact that when you do that, you will end up having much more thoughts and you're not putting the mind at rest. So what you need, a meditation should be a real tool, or a real meditation should be where you're able to disconnect from the mind. And the mind is not in play there. That is where really you will be able to calm it. Otherwise, how can you use the same tool to calm itself? You cannot use the mind itself to do meditation and then expect the mind is calm. It will not happen, right? So this is where a practice is necessary, which can help you to show that difference. And then when you're able to do so, you will be able to see that the moment you're able to connect to yourself, you also move from the element of thinking to feeling. And heart has a voice, but that voice is transmitted through a feeling, not through the mind in terms of thoughts and ideas. So but how do you catch that voice? You will be only able to catch that voice when that clutter and the noise is not there, right? Even in a big room or a restaurant, if you don't have the right acoustics, you cannot even listen to the person opposite you.
Right.
So it's the same thing here. That feeling you will not sense or feel unless you have the noise, you've calmed the noise or the clutter which is there. Now that's where the element of meditation comes into play, because when you connect to your inner self, you're opening that space, that time where you are able to feel that. And then if you're able to be in that, you cannot meditate 24 hours, but if you're able to carry that meditative feeling or thought, or that sensation, in that sense that you find a way to connect to yourself as and when you want it, you will be able to hear that voice. And this will be uncluttered, this will be not polluted by anything. So for me, that's what meditation is. And I suppose everyone should try, whether it's for they need it or not. It will always be helpful, because with a clean and calm mind, like a pure water in the lake, which is, absolutely, there's just flat and calm and serene in the morning. It's the same thing here, and then when you have this kind of feeling, you're able to start your day, you're able to have a different feeling throughout the day, you feel more energized, and then you're fresh. So for me, that's what meditation has been. I mean, when I started, I was quite young. I was, a sales manager. My sales guy in one of the travels exposed me to this practice. And ever since I started, I just continued that, because for me, it was not then after that trying any other system, because I just felt so connected with this practice that I just continued. So, and then later, obviously, because of my travels, I could contribute. So I was made a trainer, so I could encourage and have people also start those practices wherever I travel. And I do as a volunteer in this practice of heartfulness meditation. We don't charge anything for people to start. So we work as volunteers. I work as volunteers sometimes in the evening, on weekends, to help people, get exposed to this practice, start the practice. We do sessions for corporates. So I think that connection with the inner self is very key in today's time. And I think that's what meditation brings.
Yeah.
And then in the end, with a clean mind, when you take a decision, I suppose maybe at that moment, as I said, in the material world, somebody may say it was a wrong or a bad, but eventually that decision will always prove to be the correct one.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that explanation. I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I'm one of those many people that does not practice meditation. However, I did make it a goal, a personal goal for this year, was to begin the practice of meditation and incorporate it into my daily routine. So now I'm recording this. It's going to be part of our interview. So there's probably going to be little emails coming from you, Nitin, saying, how's it going? How's it going? And I would welcome that. I'm on the other end of the curve. I've got fewer years out there in front of me than I have behind me. But I guess at any point in your life, you can improve yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, meditation, I don't think so. You should worry whether you lost or you did not use your last 50, 60 years, whatever, you can start anytime. It's possible to start virtually like what we are doing. We could have, face-to-face or meditation session like that. I don't know which city you are based in, but we have, trainers in those local cities also whom you could meet face-to-face and have your introductory meditation session. So I think only thing when people start, what I say is willingness. That's it. People say, what do I need? I say just willingness. That's it. If you have willingness to start even 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you will do it. You will make it part of your life and time.
Thank you. Your comments are a gift. Thank you very much. A quick last question. Our time is up.
Yes.
This has been what I expected, not what I hoped for, but what I expected. I'm so delighted that we have met and had this conversation. My last question is this. If someone were to ask you, what is perhaps the most important quality for a leader to possess to be successful as a true leader? One quality.
If you're asking me, I would say to be able to listen to your heart.
I love it. That's the final word. Nitin, this has been a delight. I know we'll have future contact. We may even find a way to meet someday. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This episode will be one that I will enjoy listening to many times.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you for having me over. And it was a great pleasure. I hope there could be some points which could be interesting to your audience, and I will also look forward to that. And yes, hopefully, if I may ask, I don't know which city are you based in?
Oh, I live in Savannah, Georgia.
So if ever I'm in that area or close to that area, I'll obviously, send you an email, and we'd love to see you face to face too also. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Doran. Dennis is the author of Soft as Steel and a leading speaker and trainer for organizations across many industries and verticals. To learn more about the work Dennis is doing to activate soft skills in the workplace, contact him at DennisDuranSpeaking.com. Be sure to check out his book, Soft as Steel, on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you'd like to get your podcasts. And please remember to share this episode with your friends, colleagues, and anyone you feel would benefit from the conversation. We'll see you next time on the Soft as Steel podcast with Dennis Doran.
Produced by Audivita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.